This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and the demonstrable value of not overthinking the task at hand, which I will not be learning from. I'm Hannah Kaiser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined, as always, by Zach Kreiser, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Hi, Zach.
Hey, how you doing? It's actual baseball season.
It's actual baseball. As I was speaking, I was trying to remember if we had recorded a podcast since there was baseball, and we have not. So Congrats to us on making it to the season. It was a long, cold, lonely winter, but we're here. What did you do for opening day?
I sat on my couch and watched 4 games at once, pretty much for the entire day. So that was great. I had 1 game on the TV, 1 game on the iPad, 1 game on the laptop, occasionally a game on the phone. Just really had all the games going to try to sift through everything at once. I don't know if there was anything else you noticed big, but I know the one thing we both noticed is that, like this podcast, baseball players are off and running this season.
Exactly. That was a great transition, but can we come back to that transition so we can talk a little more about opening day?
Sure. What happened on opening day?
No, first of all, this is like a spoiler of your take that at some point perhaps we will debut on this podcast, which is that you prefer to watch baseball on TV than in person. So you were really having your ideal opening day. Also, a not preview, but I'm going to share it anyway, of my take, which is that I simply cannot watch more than 1 baseball game at once. I know that this is the sophisticated, extreme baseball fan thing to do, but I can only watch 1 baseball game at a time, which is what I was doing in the Bronx. I went to Yankee Stadium, talked to every single person I saw about how cold it was. There were a bunch of MLB commissioner's office officials, including Theo Epstein, on hand to take in the game and to stress about the implementation of the new rules in regular season baseball, which is what they were doing. I saw a handful of them ahead of the game, and they asked them how they were. And they said, stressed out. And I said, are you stressed out about the fact that Anthony Volpe might get such a long ovation at his first at-bat that he incurs a pitch clock violation before he's even stepped to the plate? And the MLB official I was talking to said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm stressed out about. In that game, actually, the umpire, Laz Diaz, really took it upon himself to read the room. And when I think it was when Aaron Judge came to the plate, Laz Diaz decided that was a great moment to dust off home plate.
He dusted off the plate for like 20 seconds. Yeah, he just really was.
He really got in there. He was like, it's got to get super clean, and you simply cannot start the pitch clock until it is, which I thought was lovely of him. I was genuinely concerned. What if we get a pitch clock violation because of the pomp and circumstance and excitement around opening day? That would be kind of a bummer.
Well, that was some self-interest on his part, because he would be the one who had to call it after if Yankee Stadium went nuts for Aaron Judge and it made Aaron Judge get a strike. It's not like they were going to take it out on Aaron Judge.
It's true. I also asked a bunch of people how many pitch clock violations they thought we were going to see opening day. All 30 teams played, 15 games. And I thought it was interesting that it was a real disparate spread. People either said more than 30, so more than 1 per team, 2 per game, or less than 10. And it ended up being neither of those. It ended up being somewhere in between. So we're all terrible at anticipating how many pitch clock violations there are going to be. It mostly went smoothly. I know we're not going to linger on the specific pitch clock violations that happened because that was already however many days ago. And there's been sort of enough games. That's the nice thing about baseball. They play all the time. So pretty quickly you reach, if not a meaningful sample size for any one team, a relatively meaningful sample size in terms of at bats. And so we already have a pretty good idea of the rules working, at least in the early going, before teams have had a chance to adapt. Okay, now use your transition about how guys have been running a lot.
Teams are off and running. So the big thing, other than games being shorter, has been that there are a lot of stolen bases comparatively. There have been 0.65 stolen bases per team game this year so far, which doesn't sound like anything. But for context, that is the most. If it's by a whole season, we haven't had that many per team game since 2012. There's just been a lot more running, which is a combination of the pickoff rules that came with the pitch timer and the bases being bigger. So far, there's quite a bit of running. The Orioles, in particular, have stolen a lot of bases so far. They lead the majors with 11 steals, and they have two different guys who already have 4 steals, Cedric Mullins and Jorge Mateo. And they've kind of kept running even. At first, they were just playing the Red Sox, and it seemed like the Red Sox were maybe just uniquely terrible at everything regarding pitching and defense. But now they stole some bases last night too, so and not playing the Red Sox, so it's moving along. Do you like the number of stolen bases now?
Well, first of all, it's not just that there's more; it's that they are noticeably more successful, right? It's like
it's a higher success rate too.
Yeah, I like it. I said this recently to you and to our editor. I think we are working towards a there are too many stolen bases discourse. Zach, do you remember many years ago we went to an Atlantic League game when they first were experimenting with these new rules? They started in the Atlantic League, which is an independent league, and then worked their way up to the minors. We are finally seeing them here in the majors. They've had a lot of changes since then. So these were not the exact rules that we saw in the Atlantic League. But you and I, we went to the Atlantic League. We went to the Long Island Ducks. We saw a game, and I wrote about it. And we went for the for the ABS? I think they had the robo-umps. They were debuting robo-umps that day, and we thought that was going to be the big story. And instead, I wrote about the fact that there was too many stolen bases. That game featured like 10 stolen bases, and they changed the rules to cut down or to make that a little bit like they had some extremely limiting rules. I think specifically on like left-handed pitchers. But yeah, we went to one game, and I was like, wow, forget pitch clock and robo-umps. This is really going to change the game in terms of just how many stolen bases there are. But I like it. I am very interested to see whether it stabilizes because, like you talked about, the reasons we're getting all these stolen bases are the pickoff limitations and the bigger bases. I also think part of it is that the pitchers are distracted by being so focused on the pitch clock, which is related to the sort of pickoff limitations, but not exactly the same thing. So I do wonder whether as they adjust to working in that speed, that rhythm naturally, if they're more able to sort of put some attention back on the runners, whether they learn some more effective pickoff moves or holding base runners on moves. I don't know. Do you think if it continues at this rate that it is what MLB intended, or is it beyond what MLB intended?
I don't think it's very extreme right now. For, like I said, this is only back to like 2012 in terms of the overall league rate, which is not anything that made anyone say anything at the time.
True.
And I obviously there are more successful steals now compared to caught stealing, so the rate's a little bit off. But I think especially as we get a little more into the season, we're going to see some pitchers and catchers adjust how they do things. And I don't actually think it's about pickoffs. I think a lot of pitchers just do not worry about runners right now because they've played in an era where steals were so infrequent that they don't worry about slide stepping, anything like that. I think you're going to see some pitchers adapt and do slide steps. I think you might see some catchers change a little bit about how they're setting up to throw runners out. I think it'll go back to pretty much the same success rate, but maybe with an elevated rate of runners going. So the usual success rate in recent seasons has been about 75%. I think it's up over 80 right now. So I think the success rate will kick down a little bit as people adjust, but the overall rate will still end up with more stolen bases.
That seems like what it should be because, right, it's the sort of runaway success rate that's going to create this like cumulative snowballing effect, which is that like at some point, if the success rate league wide gets to a certain level, it always makes sense to run in the fancy sort of like, value added calculation that you can do based on the runner on first versus second, that kind of thing. Also, I assume that the BABIP, the batting average on balls in play, is going to factor into whether it makes more sense for guys to stay on first or try to get to second. That's the thing I hadn't thought about until right now.
And something about this is another rules factor where the shift is changing how batted balls work. But the increase in guys getting on base has actually mostly come in singles. So that's also contributing more opportunities to go to second and reason to go to second. So I think you're seeing a nice, honestly, that seems exactly like what MLB wanted.
Yes.
Get a ball in play that results in a hit and then gives an opportunity for a guy to steal a meaningful base, because first to second is the most significant base to get unless it's a one out, sack fly situation. That's really what you're looking for. That's what you're incentivized to do. So I think those are working in tandem right now to create that situation. And I don't think the singles thing is going to go away. I think singles are going to be up this year. It's just a matter of whether guys remain as eager to go, whether pitchers and catchers do anything to deter them or to start to throw them out more. I think competitive throws is that's great. People will continue to go if it's competitive and the success rate stays up around 75 or 80%. So
I realize I'm coming off as sort of anti-stolen base, which is not at all how I feel. I'm loving that lots
You're
of people
anticipating the take.
I'm anticipating the take. I've become very attuned to anticipatory takes. I'm sort of like, oh no, what is the discourse going to be? And thus far, the discourse has been, we love these new rules. And also that the games are shorter in a way that MLB had actually sort of warned they wouldn't be. There was sort of in this messaging around the fact that games were half an hour shorter in the minors, but they probably won't be that much shorter in the majors. They kind of are. They kind of are that much shorter. So that's working.
I will say the last thing on the stolen base is the one thing I'm interested to see is how much of a element of surprise is factoring into this right now. Because Ty France, Mariners first baseman last night, he had never stolen a base before in the majors. Last night he was on second and he stole third. Oh. And I don't think anyone in the stadium expected Ty France to steal third. So of course he was successful. Not by that much, but he was successful. And I don't know how often Ty France is going to be able to pull off the no one sees it coming stolen base. So, maybe this will work for Daniel Vogelbach.
Yeah, I was going to say, by that logic, Daniel Vogelbach should be running. This is really reminiscent of the fact that Albert Pujols was a surprisingly successful stolen base stealer, surprisingly successful base stealer. He had a very high stolen base success rate because nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, as Monty Python would say. You built a game?
Yes. So the Orioles, who we were just discussing, they are playing the Texas Rangers right now.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't want to give away too much, but when the Orioles and the Rangers play, weird things happen.
Really?
So last night, nothing that weird happened. The Orioles pitcher started off great and then got hit by a comebacker in the foot and had to leave the game. But then an Orioles reliever, Tyler Wells, came in and threw 4 shutout innings, and the Orioles won. So I want to give you a list. It'll be very quick. All I need from you is a yes or no.
Okay.
Did this thing happen in an Orioles-Rangers game?
At any point.
At any point.
In history.
Both these teams, the Rangers, migrated from Washington in the 60s. The Orioles came into being the Orioles have been around a while. But anyway, we're going to do, did this happen in an Orioles-Rangers game? Most of them are pretty recent. Here we go.
Oh my gosh. I think I'm embarrassing when I don't do well. These are not teams that I've paid a ton of attention to in recent years. I feel like some context is required. I've been covering baseball on a serious day-to-day basis since 2019. Neither of those teams have been good in that stretch. Okay, continue.
Okay, first thing. An August trade acquisition with a 9.38 ERA in Texas beats Yu Darvish in the first ever AL wildcard game.
True.
Yes, that happened. Joe Saunders of the Baltimore Orioles outdueled Yu Darvish in the first AL wildcard game in 2012. Number 2. The Texas Rangers beat the Orioles 30-3, scoring the most runs of any major league team in modern history.
False.
No, that happened. That's the big one. That's the most famous Orioles-Rangers game. The Rangers crushed the Orioles in 2007. Next, the Rangers' Colby Lewis becomes the only pitcher in Major League history to give up 5 homers and log 10 strikeouts in the same game.
Are these all true? True.
That one's true.
But are they all true?
You don't get to know that one yet.
Is this a bit?
Number
Are you doing a bit?
4. The Rangers beat the Orioles 26-7, tying for the 4th most runs scored in modern history.
True.
That one's true.
Okay, this is a bit.
Josh Hamilton becomes the first MLB player in almost 9 years to hit 4 home runs in a game.
I mean, that seems like something that Josh Hamilton would do. Also true.
He did do that, and it was against the Orioles. Yes, that is true.
Okay. This is a fun history of these two teams who may or may not factor into the season.
Here we go.
Orioles
Manny
player,
Machado
famously.
Sprints in and fakes a throw to first, then turns and fires behind the deked out runner to get an out in a big pennant race.
In a big pennant race? While he was with the Orioles?
This was in 2012. Yes, it is. He was with the Orioles.
Okay, I'm going to say true only because I think you're doing a bit, but otherwise I would have said false.
No, that's false. That was against the Rays. That did happen, but it was against the Rays.
I was going to say, who's in a pennant race with these teams? Okay, so that one was false. I get partial credit.
Second half here. Let's see. Coming down the home stretch. A woman known as the Kissing Bandit runs onto the field, gets all the way to the batter's box, and kisses Cal Ripken before being escorted off by police.
Oh, that's true.
That is true.
Yeah,
that happened in 1988. Yes. Also against the Rangers. The Rangers were playing them. That was in Baltimore. The Rangers become the first team to hit game-tying homers in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, but still lose the game.
False.
That also happened against the Orioles. That's true. That was that was last year. So here we go. Next one. That game helped the 2022 Orioles spark a sweep and eventually a 10-game winning streak, 1 year after they lost 19 games in a row. That was the first 10-game winning streak by a team that had lost that many in a row since the 1889-1890 Louisville Colonels, starring Farmer Weaver.
Oh my God, if any one part of this is not true and the rest of it is true, I will be mad at you. We will be in an actual fight. So, true.
That is true.
Okay, good. It wasn't like actually. It was the 1903
Louisville Colonels.
Yes.
Okay, last one. Did this happen in an Orioles-Rangers game? Ian Kinsler becomes the first player since Farmer Weaver of the 1890 Louisville Colonels to hit for the cycle and record 6 or more hits without making an out.
True.
That is true. All of this happened in an Orioles-Rangers game.
So only the Manny Machado thing was false?
Yes. It was really a struggle to come up with anything absurd enough to be false for this series.
Look, I appreciate that history lesson. That was delightful. Thank you for introducing me to all of those fun facts. You are not good at games.
You try finding a weirder thing that didn't happen in this matchup.
All right, next time. I would have loved to know what you would have made up. What would you have made up? Give me a fake fact right now.
That's kind of the hard part. Adrian Beltre is the first player since Tony Gwynn to hit 3 home runs in a game without a swinging strike.
See, that would have been great. That's a great fun fact.
I don't know if that's true or not, though.
I still would have been mad that if you were like, that's false, I would have been like, that's too specific. Okay. That was delightful. I enjoyed that. I had no idea that was what you were planning when you said that you had a great game in mind. And I have no idea how your brain works that got you to that point when tasked with coming up with a game about opening weekend.
It wasn't about opening weekend. It was about the Orioles-Rangers series that started last night. Watch this. Something weird will happen.
Of course, the all-important Orioles-Rangers series. You don't even think the Rangers are going to be good?
No, I don't.
I think the Rangers. Do you think the Orioles are going to be good? Who do you think is going to be better? Ooh, fun fact. I haven't asked you yet.
I think the Orioles might be a better team this year. They're also in a very tough division. They're kind of both in tough divisions. You know what? Yes. I'll go with the Orioles. I think the Orioles will have a slightly better record than the Rangers.
Oh, okay. I'll take the Rangers. We could have a fun intra-podcast. Inter or intra? Intra podcast wager. All right. Somebody write it down. I say the Rangers are going to have a better record at the end of the season. Zach says the Orioles are going to have a better record at the end of the season. And we both think that we'll remember why we were comparing those two teams, but I'm not confident that we shall. All right. What else happened this week that rises to the level of being discussed? Do you want to discuss the Anthony Rendon situation?
We should probably mention the Anthony Rendon thing.
Okay. So Anthony Rendon accosted a fan who may or may not have deserved it. We don't know what he said. He was suspended for 5 games. He appealed it. He's now suspended for 4 games. He's started serving that already. This is not a great look for the Angels' start to their season. Also, this is not interesting to anybody else, but it matters to us. In the course of sort of dealing with this situation, the Angels didn't let the media in the clubhouse, which is not a thing they're allowed to do. So they got in trouble for that. Do you care? I was going to ask whose side you're on, but that's a terrible question.
No, there's no good sides.
There's no good sides. But do you care about this?
So I will say this was an A's fan in Oakland after the first game of the season. The Angels lost, and this happened immediately after, from what I can tell. Also, Rendon and the fan have reportedly talked and apologized to each other. I think that was put out in the wake of the suspension appeal. I think it's not good. You should never go after a fan, and presumably the fan should not have said whatever he said to Anthony Rendon. But
yeah.
I think we will care about this pretty much in direct proportion to how good the Angels' season is. If they are really bad and waste Shohei Ohtani's potential last season there, everyone will remember this forever. And if they contend at all, we probably won't think about this that much, assuming Anthony Rendon doesn't accost any more fans. So not good, but hopefully this is a blip on the radar for the Angels.
Yeah, this is really this is a tricky one because I think it's easier for us to comment on the player in this situation. And so it's very easy to say Anthony Rendon, what a jamoke. He shouldn't do that. And he shouldn't. But I also think that baseball players are people, and treating them as not people, both by being someone who says disgusting things to them, whatever it was that said, and also sort of being outraged and alarmed anytime they have a reaction. I don't know. That also, I don't think we should envision such a separation between fans and players that we can take for granted that the things that fans do have an effect on players, because I think that's a bad precedent to set online, in person. You should treat the baseball players with a little bit of respect. That guy should not. Assume he's been banned, he cannot ever go to an Oakland game because there's not enough people. They'll recognize him. They'll look at every single person's face.
I don't think we know that he's been banned, but they usually announce that type of thing, and they
really. All right, well, he should be, because again, wrong for Anthony Rendon to do this, but also you're there for positive reasons. If you are a fan, booing is fine, but generally you're there for positive reasons, to enjoy yourself, to watch a baseball game. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and come back with a conversation about throwing the ball down the middle. You'd think that that's what most of baseball is about, but it's not. And this week's Bandwagon. All right, we are back, and this being our first regular season baseball podcast, we're going to sort of introduce a segment, I guess, that we're going to try to sort of stick to most of the time, if not all of the time. The conceit of this podcast, if you will, is that we're going to sort of investigate, not questions kind of, big topics, trends in baseball, and we are going to come at it from our respective perspectives. I tend to do more reporting. You tend to do more data analysis, but those are not exclusive. Those are not mutually exclusive by any means. And so, yeah, basically, it's just here's a big topic that we're going to dive into pretty deeply that is a little bit timely, but not necessarily timely, and is sort of outside the general news cycle. Okay, that was way more preamble. You would have just figured it out as you listened along if you're listening to these podcasts on a regular basis. What are we talking about this week, Zach?
We are talking about the strategy that sounds way too simple, but is in fact somewhat novel, to tell your pitchers to just chuck it right down the middle and see what happens. This is a little more complicated than that, but the gist of this is some teams, we've traced it mostly back to the Tampa Bay Rays a few years ago, started telling their catcher to set up in the middle and give the target down the middle and just keep doing that. Don't try to move to the corners. Don't try to give the pitcher, a really precise target on the paint. And if you've watched baseball at all, you know that the catchers tend to move around and give specific targets. And this is basically a strategy that breaks that mold in hopes of encouraging pitchers to throw more strikes.
Yeah. We should get into a little bit sort of how we each came upon this. This is a story that we wrote and reported. It's already up on Yahoo Sports. You can go read it right now. It's a story that we wrote and reported in spring training together. Little how the sausage is made. I was spending some time in Florida talking to the various Mets pitchers, and I was noticing in their bullpens that Scherzer and Verlander in particular, two pretty expert pitchers, were being really explicit about telling their catchers where to set up. And I talked to them both about it after that bullpen. And they were just sort of saying like, yeah, catchers these days, they tend to move more because of the framing, the sort of training that they've gotten in terms of how to best frame pitches. But I like them to set up more in the middle. That's not actually exactly what's happening here because they're pretty good pitchers who can get strikes wherever they want to locate it. But I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe we want to ask some people about how they like their catchers to set up. Just, is there a counter trend to the framing trend in how pitchers like their catchers to set up? I mentioned to you that I was thinking about doing this, and you sort of said that you were thinking about doing something about pitchers throwing the ball right down the middle. And we were like, these are two ends of the same battery. We should work on this together. And so, yeah, we talked to a bunch of people, and then also you helpfully provided pretty compelling evidence, which is what the baseball teams themselves are looking at, that throwing, especially first pitch strikes, is both incredibly effective and in some ways easier. It's not easy to be a Major League Baseball player, but easier than you might think because batters tend not to swing at the first pitch. So, okay, take us through a little bit of the data backing this up that the teams are often relaying to their pitchers to make this more compelling.
Yeah, so first pitch strikes, it changes if you are a pitcher and you are in the first pitch of a new at-bat. If you throw a ball on the first one, you pretty much instantly turn into a minor league player. You are unlikely to get a good result. It's very, very bad. If you throw a first pitch strike and go up 0-1, then suddenly you're Aaron Nola. The rest of the at-bats that start 0-1 have about the same results as Aaron Nola did in 2022, which is extremely good. So that swing is a huge swing. And there's another thing about the first pitch that matters, which is it has such a lower swing rate on the batter's perspective. It is batters swing at about 31% of first pitches, and then they swing at more than 52% of all the rest of the pitches. So you are unlikely to get hurt by a swing, by a home run, by a hit, comparatively. And when you do all the math of what happens when people actually do swing, you're looking at, if you throw 100 pitches in the zone for first pitches, only between 5 and 6% of them are actually going to create any damage for you, which is a much lower rate than all the rest of the pitches that you throw. So on the whole, you should aim down the middle and get it in the zone. Why do you have to aim right down the middle to do that? Is because you are a major league pitcher. You're throwing very hard and your stuff is often very bendy. Sliders, fastballs are moving more than, if you or I go outside and throw a baseball, it goes straight. And also a hitter could put it into the next county. Major league pitchers, things move more and they aren't perfect. So they tend to miss by 7 to 8 inches on average. So if you aim down the middle, you're most likely to get it in the strike and get it in the zone and get that first pitch strike. So that is what teams are saying. Brent Strom, the legendary pitching coach, formerly of the Astros, now with the Diamondbacks, told me that it's kind of like playing as Vegas. You are the house. You have a distinct advantage. So he's telling his pitchers to think that way and just get that ball into the zone for the first strike.
Right. That was a really effective recap. Basically, the pitchers are so good. This is from the Rays' perspective, what happened is they would get these pitchers who were maybe not getting great results with other teams. But the Rays were looking at some underlying metrics that led them to believe, these guys have great stuff. And then they would hone that stuff, get them to have a couple really unhittable pitches, and then encourage them to trust their stuff and not worry about locating and just sort of aim for the strike zone. I talked to Mike Zunino, who was the Rays catcher for a while, who's now with the Guardians. And he was, first of all, very great about talking about this because he really understands it really well. But also, right, he sort of said, one, guys loved coming to the Rays because of this, because they were basically like, you're a really good pitcher and you don't need to think so hard about trying to get guys out. You need to just throw your really good pitches at the middle of the plate. And that's why we've seen a lot of pitchers sort of have this seemingly sudden ascendance with the ascendance with the Rays. Assurgence should be a word. And the proliferation of this away from the Rays. I mean, a lot of teams do this. The Astros do this. The Dodgers do this. We shouldn't give the Rays sort of so much credit. They're not the only team that has figured out that, one, major league pitchers throw unhittable stuff, and two, it's better to put it in the strike zone if you have that kind of stuff. But the proliferation has really come from the Rays. I was in Royals camp. Okay, the Royals, a team you generally don't think about being very good because they're not. And in fact, last year, they were the worst team in baseball at throwing those first pitch strikes that are so important to getting ahead, to giving your pitchers that kind of Vegas house advantage. And so what they did was go out and get some people from the Rays. They signed Rays bench coach Matt Quatraro to be their new manager. He brought with him Paul Hoover to now be his bench coach. And this was like first on the agenda in some ways. They were sort of saying, you know, we showed up, we tried to get them to do this. They got a little bit of, I don't know if they got pushback, but the pitchers
got some quizzical looks.
Some quizzical looks, perhaps some trepidation from the pitchers who didn't want to give up a bunch of home runs and get demoted. And so when I was in spring training, I should follow up. I should find out if they actually did this. When I was in spring training, Paul Hoover, the now bench coach, came from the Rays, was saying that in an effort to kind of assure their pitchers that they wouldn't be penalized if they gave up these home runs or big hits sort of on these first pitches, that they would pay them something like $50 or $100 for every first pitch home run they gave up. Basically, like, you put it in the middle of the plate and either you will have a good outcome from your at bat or you'll make some money. And I just thought that's such an interesting, strong testament to how much they want their pitchers to buy into this mentally. They want them to be like, no fear, put it in the middle of the plate. Nothing bad's going to happen, even if you give up a home run. This doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. Obviously, there are some pitchers whose whole thing is their ability to locate. Joe Musgrove, who's one of those pitchers, described it as, aim small, miss small. He's a guy who doesn't have as good of stuff. He's got pretty good stuff. He's a major league pitcher. But he really relies on that location. And even in relying on location and not sort of adhering to this aim for the middle of the plate strategy, it's still really interesting to talk to pitchers about how the catcher's setup and providing of a target factors into how well they think they perform or how comfortable they are performing. I mean, guys have really specific, that was sort of the most interesting thing to me. One, the strategy is very interesting. People should know about it when they're watching baseball. It's really factoring into which teams are doing well, as we sort of learned when we dug into the numbers about how the Royals were and compared to these other teams that are better at throwing first pitch strikes. But also I just thought it was sort of interesting to think about this whole world of batteries in which pitchers and catchers are navigating. How does a guy like it? Where does he like the setup to be where the pitch is going to start, where the pitch is going to end up? Does he want the benefit of framing, which is a sort of an entirely other rabbit hole that we didn't necessarily get into? Again, back to Mike Zunino, the Rays catcher turned Guardians catcher, who's like really, really good at this. He got tons of rave reviews from everyone we spoke to about his sort of ability to benefit pitchers when he's catching. And he talked about, sometimes you got to know a pitcher better than he knows himself. You got to be able to adjust where you're setting up your glove target to perhaps correct for whatever issues you're seeing and sort of how his pitches are locating on that particular day. I love understanding specifically the dynamics of like pitchers from a mentality standpoint and how catchers can sort of factor into that. I think it's like one of the more interesting unique relationships in sports.
Yeah, and like everything in catching, this has a name. This practice has a name. It's called targeting. It's not the football play where someone hits someone else with their helmet. It's just where they set up the glove and how they encourage the pitcher to put the ball where they want to put the ball. Framing, we've really learned to quantify, and it has become obviously kind of a target of the automated balls and strike system where we don't know how long framing will be a thing, but targeting, along with game calling, deciding which pitch to throw when, those are two parts of the catching experience that remain pretty unquantifiable. It's because, like you said, it's very different from pitcher to pitcher. I think Mike Zunino told you that some pitchers want to throw to the mask. Some pitchers are throwing to the chest protector, and other pitchers are throwing to the actual glove. And knowing that and knowing how to manipulate that, sometimes without even talking to the pitcher about what it is that they see they're doing, that is a big part of how the catcher helps the pitcher do what he's trying to do. And that goes into, especially at the beginning of an at-bat, getting those strikes when you want them and getting the pitcher to throw it in the zone often means setting up in this certain way.
Yeah, we did not get into this in this story, but something I sort of wrote about earlier in the offseason was the potential effect of ABS robo-umps on catcher framing, which in some ways is at odds with targeting, but is related because it's a catcher skill that is used to value catchers. And one of the really interesting sort of trickle-down effects of potentially switching to robo-umps, if we switch to robo-umps full-time, then no longer care about framing. If we no longer care about framing, then does catching become more of an offense value position instead of a defense value position? If catching becomes more of an offensive position and we have these really high offensive expectations for catchers, then do they spend less time on these unquantifiable but beneficial defensive aspects of catching? Do you sort of, by virtue of many steps trickle down effect, end up losing some of that game calling, some of that targeting, some of that value in how catchers work with pitchers because we've taken away the quantifiable value of framing, and that makes teams think that they should be getting more offensive output from their catchers? So I think, if nothing else, that's a really interesting way of thinking about the sort of like extremely intertwined ecosystem of Major League Baseball. All of this stuff is very interesting to me, and all of it is a reason why Adley Rutschman is incredible, which is not the intended conclusion, but it seriously is. Wow, a rookie catcher having such a great year. Incredible.
Yes, and he was part of the Orioles transformation last year, which included doing the straight down the middle target for especially their bullpen. They took a lot of guys with no track record of anything good in the majors, taught them, either amped up their pitches or helped them get already successful pitches into the zone more and get more strikes out of them. And Adley Rutschman was a big part of that. But yeah, he was helping them transform that bullpen largely with a target right down the middle. So I think especially with bullpens, and if you see a guy like Felix Bautista of the Orioles coming in, suddenly throwing a 92-mile-per-hour splitter or something that dives off the table, yeah, take a look at where the catcher's setting up. I bet it's right in the heart of the plate every single time.
Are there things that you want to look into further based on this story that we did?
I just think the most interesting element is, so as we said in the story, this is a really interesting strategy, but it's step 2 of the process of being successful with it. And step 1 is either finding pitchers with awesome stuff or developing pitchers with awesome stuff or helping existing pitchers tap into their best pitches that they can confidently throw down the middle and know they can get whiffs, they can get bad contact, everything like that. And the Rays have really succeeded in that and in focusing pitchers on the one pitch that is their best one. I think we're just going to see that more and more and more and more, or pitches in combos like Spencer Strider's fastball and slider that work really well off each other and can be thrown to the same target and end up in very different places. I think that is, that's kind of the secret of pitching in the majors right now. And I think developing more and more tactics that revolve around that is going to be the focus of a lot of teams right now. And I don't really know how hitters can counter that. So I'm watching for what pitches get used in those situations, whether more guys start throwing sliders as first pitches and can get them in the zone. If we get to the world where, 90, 91 mile per hour sliders that can be thrown in the zone are commonplace, it might not matter that the shift is gone. No one's ever going to hit the ball. So,
okay, that brings us to this week's bandwagon. You built a game, so it was my turn to bandwagon. We're out of this, both of us, bandwagon thing that we were doing preseason. So it's my bandwagon. And this week we are bandwagoning the Rays. It transitions very, very nicely from our conversation about the extremely Rays-inspired trend sweeping baseball, just to throw it right down the middle. The Rays come up with lots of trends that then end up sweeping baseball. And in fact, often they come up with trends that end up sweeping baseball, and then the rules get changed to stop everyone from doing that because it worked too well and now too many teams are doing it. That's actually not why I'm bandwagoning them, but it was a convenient little transition. As of Tuesday, April 4th, there are 2 teams that are undefeated in Major League Baseball. Zach, can you name them?
It is the Rays and the Twins. And I think this is not a coincidence that those 2 teams started their season with the Tigers and the Royals, but I'll let it go. But yes, the Rays are undefeated.
I know, and I think it showed a lot of restraint on my part to not bandwagon the Twins. One of my real... I have a soft spot for the Twins, and I was impressed that they were undefeated. But like you said, they started against bad teams. So did the Rays, who, like you said, started against the Tigers, and now they are playing the Nationals. This is their 25th anniversary season. That's not a thing that is a reason to bandwagon them, but it is, however, a reason that they are wearing their Devil Rays retro uniforms every Friday. I think that's why they're doing it, but as I told you, I think they should slowly work up to just becoming the Devil Rays again, but do it one day of the week at a time. It should take 7 seasons. It should be every Friday. Then it should be every Saturday. Switch it up, make it every Tuesday, jump around. But I love these Devil Rays throwbacks.
How many circles of hell were there in Dante's Inferno? Should they go through that many cycles to get to Devil Rays?
Oh my gosh. We should know that. I'm going to go Google it. Circles of hell, how many? It's probably 7, right? Sounds like 7. 9. That was going to be my other guess.
I was going to say 9, and I wasn't confident enough.
6.
Okay, well, there aren't enough days of the week, but they could transition over 9 seasons. That's 9 innings. It's 9 innings. It's perfect.
Over 9 innings. They should wear it for one more inning. They should only in the first inning, only in the second inning. No, I do really enjoy these throwbacks. Everybody loves the Rays throwbacks. The Rays throwbacks are one of those throwback uniforms that has such universal approval that it's like, just make those your uniforms again. Why are you bothering with anything else? Everybody loves the tie-dye Devil Rays. Anyway, that's one of the reasons I'm bandwagoning them. It's their 25th anniversary season. Last week for our World Series picks, I talked about how a Mariners-Padres World Series would be so much fun because it would give us a chance to see at least one team, definitely one team, at least and at maximum one team, break their no World Series, not curse, just never having won a World Series. And the Rays are also a team that has never won a World Series. And I wouldn't say that necessarily slipped my mind because the Padres and Mariners are probably more fun, but it does seem more surprising with the Rays because they're very good. Last year, they had a .531 winning percentage, and that was their 5-year low. They've been in the postseason for 4 straight years. They've played 32 postseason games in that stretch, and before that, they'd only ever played 30 postseason games in their entire franchise history. In other words, they're working up to it, and they're in an interesting place, is what you could say. They're always good. They're always in the postseason. They've never won the World Series.
They are very good, but here's the thing you're going to have to convince me of. Are they fun? Because no one thinks McKinsey, the consulting company, is fun, even though they also optimize things like the Rays.
Okay, so yes, that is the long-standing complaint against the Rays. There's a complaint against the Rays that is sort of, they are good because of what the front office does, not of what the players do. Not because of what the players do, and that's not fun. And I have both an ideological response to that as well as some actual interesting, specific 2023 evidence to back that up. My ideological response to that is the players are still winning the games, and we should not hold it against these Rays players that the front office has put them in a position to succeed. That's what we should want for everyone in all walks of life. Like, truly, that is the what we mean when we say that the Rays are winning because of what their front office is doing, is that they are very good at putting people in positions to succeed, i.e. getting pitchers who have great stuff and teaching them to throw it right down the middle. That is putting someone in a position to succeed. And maybe they are not the most impressive all-around baseball players all the time, but I'm happy for them that they have been put in a position to succeed, and now they get to make the Major League Baseball minimum, if not more, for finding the right company to work for. That is actually a very positive labor thing, and the Rays are often considered to be anti-labor. So that's my ideological complaint, and that's one that I genuinely stand by, which is that, like, the Rays are not unfun because the people who are succeeding on the Rays are people who you wouldn't have heard of if they weren't playing for the Rays. I'm glad they're playing for the Rays then. That gives them a chance to succeed. Now, in a perhaps more compelling to people who aren't me response to that, they also just have a lot of fun players now that people are maybe not paying attention to because they're on the Rays, or maybe you are paying attention to them and you know that they're really fun. Okay, so first of all, one of the things that the Rays have always been really good at is preventing runs. So I wanted to look at kind of what they're good at from a run scoring perspective this year. ESPN helpfully did these preseason lineup rankings in which they categorized every lineup by best and worst traits. And the Rays lineup worst trait this year is patience and long ball, so walks and home runs basically. And their best traits are contact, strike zone command, gap to gap, BABIP, so batting average on balls in play, and speed. In other words, it's extremely not three true outcomes-y. They are the 2022 Cleveland Guardians, I guess, in a way. They're supposed to be very good at contact, very good at running, and not striking out a lot, not walking, and not hitting a lot of home runs. Who will be doing those things, you ask? Namely, primarily, Wander Franco, who was my AL MVP pick. And do I think that was a good pick? No, because Shohei Ohtani exists. But I made that pick anyway because I think we should all be paying more attention to Wander Franco, who is always incredible. In fact, I don't have the numbers here, but the Rays gave him some ridiculous, extremely un-Raysian extension, like before he was even legally able to drink, because he's so good. But also this year, he's very good. This isn't a metric we need to be looking at yet because it's less than a week into the season. But currently, Wander Franco, second in Major League Baseball in Fangraphs WAR. In 4 games, he's batting over 500. He's got 4 RBIs, 2 stolen bases. He had an opening day Oppo home run. I think this is his year. I do. So Wander Franco is someone that we've been talking about since before he debuted. ESPN's Jeff Passan did
since before he could drive.
Yes. ESPN's Jeff Passan did like a big feature on him in the minors to sort of write about like, who is this kid that's like everyone's making a big deal about before he even debuted. Then he debuted. Then he didn't debut. There was a pandemic between when Jeff Passan wrote that story and when he did debut. The pandemic kind of made us forget about a lot of things, including people who had seemed like really exciting prospects in 2019. Then he did debut and he didn't play a ton of games in 2021. And then last year he didn't play a ton of games. And so this could be the first full season of Wander Franco, which would come, was that 5 years after Jeff wrote that story? Exactly. Yeah. But potentially still his sort of first full season. And also he's only 22 years old. So even if he only starts being truly incredible right now, he's still going to be really incredible for like a very long time before he ever even starts to potentially decline. So that's like a pretty big, compelling reason. I think they have one of the most interesting stars. He's 22 years old. He has not put it all together in a full season yet. This could be that season. Also, they have Randy Arozarena, who I think everybody met, if not in the postseason 2020 or 2021, then they met him in the World Baseball Classic this year. Randy Arozarena loves a big stage. He defected from Cuba, settled in Mexico, and then played for Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic this March. He was great. If you saw anything from the World Baseball Classic, if you saw anything, you saw the Mike Trout versus Shohei Ohtani at bat. If you saw 2 things from the World Baseball Classic, the second thing you would have seen was probably some Randy Arozarena highlight because he was good. He was playing well. He had a great World Baseball Classic. Where do I have his stats somewhere? In 20 World Baseball Classic at bats, he had 9 hits, scored 8 runs. But the more important thing is that he was extremely emotive and incredibly cool. And he robbed a home run memorably and then managed to incredibly dramatically do nothing.
He did a meme. He just became a meme on command.
He froze on the field, and everyone went wild. They loved it, including the fans, which he then signed autographs for, I think, during the inning break before returning to the dugout. He also, if I'm wrong, if he did this prior to the World Baseball Classic, please correct me, but he started doing this celebration where he just really emphatically and dramatically folds his arms. Like I'm gonna do it, but if you're not watching,
he's disappointed in you. He's a disappointed in you dad, except he's not disappointed. He's very happy with himself.
And then on the one home run he has hit so far this regular season, he did that right before getting to third base. Like, he stopped on the base pass, did the little arm fold thing. It was great. So yeah, Randy Arozarena is an incredible baseball presence and a very specific baseball presence. Also, he's someone who loves to attempt stolen bases. He loves to steal bases, but even more than that, he loves to attempt to steal bases. And so the improved success rate of stolen bases can only make Randy Arozarena more fun, because he was going to run either way.
He might bring it down by himself.
Okay, so we talked about some hitters. We should talk about the pitching, which is still their strength, despite the fact that they also have some cool, flashy hitters. The strength is the pitching. Tyler Glasnow, not currently pitching for them because he has an oblique injury. It's only going to set him back a little bit, but when he does come back, he's going to be my favorite pitcher to watch. If, again, forgetting about Shohei Ohtani. Why do I keep doing that? Okay, my second favorite. We gotta have like a Shohei Ohtani exception where he's like when they used to have the Aroldis Chapman filter on StatCast so that you could find all the pitches that were really fast but not Chapman's. We need that for Shohei Ohtani with favorite X. Yes, exactly. I need to be allowed to use superlatives without having to be like, that's not true. Shohei Ohtani exists. Okay. Yeah. After Shohei Ohtani, my most interested pitcher that I would like to watch is Tyler Glasnow. When they sidelined him, they said that he will miss 6 to 8 weeks with an oblique injury. Today, April 4th, is 5 weeks from that announcement. We could be 1 week away from Tyler Glasnow's debut. I enjoyed this Kevin Cash, who is their manager, quote that he gave at the time, which is, it gives us better workload management for him, so he's not yelling at me every time I take him out in the 5th inning. We love a self-aware manager. So kudos to you, Kevin Cash, for making that extremely self-deprecating joke. Somewhere Blake Snell is like, come on. I should say, actually, Blake Snell, who I spoke to in spring training, raves about the Rays. Still only has incredibly positive things to say about them, despite the fact that he famously was taken out of that postseason game and now pitches for the Padres, a team who everyone thinks is so much fun, but perhaps not as much fun as the Tampa Bay Rays. Okay, this is a very you thing. Do you want to tell us, even though I'm the one bandwagoning them, do you want to tell us about Jeffrey Springs? I feel like he's definitely someone you will have thoughts about. This 30-year-old pitcher.
Yeah, Jeffrey Springs is a real Rays thing. He was really not doing that great. Didn't have a career prior to 2021-ish. He was rehabbing a torn ACL. The Rays had signed him. He was rehabbing a torn ACL, and then last year, 2022, he entered the season as just like a bullpen option, which if you've ever watched the Rays, you know that they have like maybe 2 or 3 bullpen guys you've heard of, and then the last 4 guys, it's like, I don't know who that is, but he's probably going to be good. Well, Jeffrey Springs was just hanging out in the bullpen, and then everyone got hurt. A lot of Rays pitchers got hurt, including some really big ones who they'd gotten in big trades, like Luis Patino. They said, well, Jeffrey Springs, we think you can give us some innings. Why don't you go into the rotation? And he was awesome. He just was really good immediately. This year, they said, hey, Jeffrey Springs, do you want $65 million to stay here for a while? And he said, sure. So now they have locked up Jeffrey Springs for an extended amount of time. And in the first game of the season that he pitched, he took a no-hitter into the 6th, and he was pulled because of pitch count and everything. But He was extremely good in his first outing, and no one really saw it coming, but he is peak Rays, and that they identified some really good stuff that he has. He has a ridiculous changeup, and they said, go ahead and do your thing. And now he's a fixture in this rotation who, if you were trying to project a couple years ago, he would not have been on the radar.
Okay, first of all, you, my friend, are incredible. I did not tell you that I was going to ask you to explain Jeffrey Springs to us. And you had so much information ready to go. I thought you were just going to be like, that guy, he was no one, and now he's great. But so you told that story very well. And to me, that is the sort of like, this is why I think the Rays are fun and not fun. Jeffrey Springs was a 30-year-old who prior to this year had made a total of 27 starts across 5 seasons. Mostly he spent that time as a reliever, like you said. He was drafted 888th overall in 2015.
Which is not a place you can be drafted anymore.
Exactly. That round no longer even exists. He signed for $1,000, and now he's this. And that's sort of the point that I was making originally, the ideological point, which is that, like, why do we say it's not fun when those guys go to the Rays and they're put in positions to succeed, and then they turn into someone who, for him, positive that he's worth a lot of money, and for us, can throw 6 innings of no hit, 1 walk, 12 strikeout baseball. That seems great for us. I love that. And I love that for Jeffrey Springs. Jeff Passan tweeted after that start, that was so incredible, that once Tyler Glasnow returns, Tampa Bay staff should be Shane McClanahan, Tyler Glasnow, Zach Eflin, Jeffrey Springs, and Drew Rasmussen, which might be the best rotation in baseball. So that is fun for people who enjoy really good pitching, which I really do. Have I sold you? I know you are especially disinclined to find the Rays fun. Have I compelled you to think they're fun?
I find Jeffrey Springs and some of the pitchers fun. I find Wander Franco fun because he's like the little baby carbon copy of Jose Ramirez, who's one of my favorite players to watch. They're from the same town too. But I still have some qualms in that the Rays field a lot of guys who have some sort of one weird trick to make them good and get on base. Like Yandy Diaz looks like a bodybuilder and cannot hit home runs, and that is very frustrating to me to watch. But he gets on base a lot, so he's very valuable. Jose Siri, they're fielding like Kevin Kiermaier on steroids in that he cannot really hit, but he's very fast and plays defense. So there are some parts that are frustrating to watch, but I will give you some of their key players are extremely fun. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. I appreciate you saying that. Also, really good defense is fun. And Yandy Diaz being visually incongruous with his skill set is perhaps not fun in a baseball sense, but it is like a cute little quirk of reality. It feels like one of those things that you're like, weird how that's true. Weird that someone who is so visually strong is also a professional athlete, but not in the way that you would think. I like that.
Not in the way you would think.
I enjoy that. All right. That's all that we've got for you this week. Stay in touch and informed by following us both on Twitter. I am at Hannah R. Kaiser and he's at Z Kreiser. If you have made it this far, you should definitely subscribe. And if you have made it this far and you like it, you should leave us a review. If you made it this far and don't like it, that is some strange self-defeating behavior. Okay. We will be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.